Everyone talks about what you lose in an economic collapse. The jobs, the savings, the stability, but almost no one explains what actually survives. And that matters, because history shows something very uncomfortable. Most people don't lose everything because they made reckless decisions. They lose everything because they prepared for the wrong kind of world. A world where systems keep working, where access is guaranteed, where the rules stay the same. But collapse doesn't break everything at once. It breaks the connection between things, the connection between money and value, between effort and reward, between ownership and control. And when those connections fail, the question is no longer what you own, but what you can actually use. Because collapse doesn't destroy value. It moves it. Quietly, unevenly, and often invisibly at first. And the people who navigate it best are not the ones with the most assets on paper, but the ones whose lives are structured in a way that doesn't depend entirely on one fragile system continuing to function. So if you step away from the noise, from the headlines, from the panic, and just look at history, patterns start to emerge. Patterns that repeat across countries, across decades, across completely different political and economic systems. And those patterns reveal something very specific. There are certain forms of value that tend to hold, not perfectly, not without loss, but far more reliably than everything else. The first is liquidity, not wealth, not net worth, not assets locked in accounts or tied up in systems, but access. The ability to actually use your resources when you need them. Because during collapse, the system doesn't disappear, it restricts. Banks still exist, but they won't give you your money. Markets still exist, but there are no buyers. Your account balance might still be there, but access becomes limited, delayed, or conditional. And in that moment, the difference between having and not having is not how much you own, it's how much you can reach. Liquidity is not about being rich, it's about not being trapped. The second is mobility, the ability to move, physically, economically, strategically. Because collapse is never perfectly uniform. Some regions deteriorate faster. Some sectors collapse sooner. Some currencies fail before others. And the people who can adjust, who can relocate, who can shift direction without being locked into one place, they don't avoid collapse, but they avoid the worst of it. While others remain anchored, tied to homes they cannot sell, jobs that no longer exist, or systems that no longer function. Mobility doesn't guarantee safety, but lack of it guarantees exposure. The third is real skills. Not credentials, not degrees, not titles that depend on a functioning system to have meaning, but the ability to produce value directly. Because when systems break, the structure that assigns value to credentials breaks with it. The degree doesn't disappear, the job market it connects to does. And suddenly, the most valuable people are not the most formally educated, but the most adaptable. The ones who can solve problems, create value, and adjust to new conditions without waiting for a system to validate them. Skills that depend on institutions collapse with those institutions. Skills that function independently survive with you. The fourth is functional assets. And this is where most people get it wrong. Because in stable times, people chase assets that appreciate, assets that increase in value over time, assets that look good on paper. But in collapse, appreciation becomes irrelevant, and function becomes everything. The question is no longer, will this be worth more later? It becomes, what does this do right now? Can it be used, traded, consumed, or exchanged directly? Because assets that require a stable system to realize their value lose that value when the system breaks, while assets that provide immediate utility retain relevance even when everything else becomes uncertain. And the fifth is networks. People. Because when formal systems weaken, informal systems replace them. Contracts become unreliable. Institutions become inconsistent. And access shifts away from systems toward relationships. In every collapse, you see the same shift. Trust becomes localized. Transactions become personal, And the ability to navigate reality depends less on what system you're part of, and more on who you know and who trusts you. This isn't theoretical. It's one of the most consistent patterns across every major economic breakdown. Now step back and look at what all of these have in common: liquidity, mobility, skills, functional assets, networks. None of them depend entirely on a single system working perfectly. And that's the real pattern. Because collapse doesn't just destroy wealth, it exposes dependency. It reveals how much of your life, your security, your options are tied to assumptions that only hold in stable conditions. Stable currency, functioning institutions, predictable markets, consistent rules. And when those assumptions break, everything built on top of them becomes fragile at the same time. This doesn't mean collapse is inevitable, and it doesn't mean you should live in constant fear of it. That's not the point. The point is awareness. Understanding that what looks like stability is often just a period where the system is still functioning well enough to hide its weaknesses. Because history is very clear on this. Systems don't fail gradually. They appear stable, until suddenly they aren't. And when that shift happens, the difference between people who adapt and people who get trapped is not intelligence, not effort, not even discipline. It's structure. How their lives are built, what they depend on, and how flexible they are when conditions change. Because in stable times, everything looks safe. Everything looks permanent. Everything looks reliable. And that illusion can last for years, even decades. Long enough for people to forget that it is an illusion at all, until the moment it breaks. And when it does, the question is no longer what you believed or what you were told, it's what actually holds. If this gave you a different way of seeing things, subscribe to Capital Historian, because this channel doesn't predict the future. It reveals the patterns that repeat, long before they become personal. And if you found value in this, hit like, because that's how this reaches more people who need to see it.